My name is Sally Jacobs. I am the archivist for the McCormick International Harvester Collection at the Wisconsin Historical Society. Today is June 18th, 2016, and I am at the Red Power Roundup at the Racine County Fairgrounds. I'm here with Rob Houtz, who's going to tell me about your dealership. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thanks for coming.
Okay. Talking somewhat chronological order.
Sure.
My grandfather was born in Oak Hall, Pennsylvania in 1885 and moved to Elburn, Illinois when he was 4. My grandmother was born in Elburn in 1887. I came along in 1949, and I've been involved in the family business all of my life. My grandfather, Robert Frank Houtz, went by Frank, and he started the dealership in 1934 after working on grain binders at the local co-op. My father, Robert John Nelson Houtz, joined him in 1935, and we've been a continuous dealership up until this year. Through the years, of course, they worked on all of the different harvester products, and they said, always told that probably the best years were the late 40s and 50s and early 60s. I grew up in the business. By the age of 10, I was driving a pickup truck with my father as we'd go out, and I remember specifically working on Model 45 balers. And out in the field, my father, we'd be going along, I'd drive the truck, my father would ride on the baler, and he'd wave his hands, and the farmer would stop. I would drive up with the truck, and my father'd say, "Give me a 2/2 inch and a 9/16 and a screwdriver." And I'd hand him the tools, and he'd work on it, and he'd hand me back the tools, he'd wave his arms, and down the road we'd continue. I also remember my father welding on a Model 45 baler. Up in the chute, there was a finger that held the twine, and my dad would hold a mirror in his hand and weld upside down with a stick welder to make this repair. It was really something.
That is something indeed.
I also remember when we delivered planters, one of my jobs was to go along and dig up the hills of corn to see if there really was 2 or 3 kernels or however many kernels, and how far apart they were, and so on. The Cub Cadet tractor came along in 1960, well, actually 59. I can't prove it, but I believe that we had at least one of the Cub Cadet demonstrator tractors. It was one of the first 500 that they built as a test market, and I can't prove that. The one thing I can prove is that by 1961, I was mowing lawns with an original.
Nice. Did you like it? I mean, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about a Cub Cadet, to be honest.
Always. We made a lot of money. Myself, when I was youngster, I sold flowers that my grandparents grew. We picked strawberries, we picked raspberries and blackberries, and I went through the neighborhood selling all of this.
Art.
Yep. So I've always worked. Again, I came along in 1949 and was involved in the business all through those years. My degree is in biology and chemistry from Aurora College, where I met my future wife, a farm girl from Sandwich, Illinois. After college, I was 6 years in the United States Naval Reserve, attached to the Marine Corps as a hospital corpsman. I then worked for 7 years as a chemist for a local company, and when they went out of business, I returned to the dealership in the fall of 1980 with my father and said, "Well, Dad, I've lost my job. I guess I'll bring my tools up here and see if I can make a living at that." Well, 35 years later, my wife and I have made a living. I've sold a lot of tractors. I've been a top 100 dealer for the last basically 30 years.
Wow.
And so I maintain that I've sold somewhere around 3,500 Cub Cadet tractors myself. this year, this is 2016. My son is not interested in the business, and March 31st, we closed the business. We sold the assets to another local dealer, and my wife and I have retired. I've taken all of my used parts home, so I have something to do.
Yes.
And so I now operate as CubCadetUsedParts.com.
Nice.
And so that's gives me something to do, gets me out of the house. And
Does it feel still like retirement though? Like you're getting a break? It's less stressful than running a dealership, I would imagine.
I don't have to open up at 8 o'clock and stay open until 5.
Yes, that's right.
So that's kind of my story. I can tell more stories and things. Well, a couple of years ago, I did a seminar at the Winter Harvester meeting about my dealership.
Nice.
I'd be excited to do that again. I would also like to produce a seminar describing the differences between a Cub Original and a Cub 70. There's so many mechanical differences that they made just in those first few years that really distinguish those two tractors from each other. That's something I'd like to do along the line.
That's fantastic. And you can, if you have a typed copy of your seminar, you can submit that to Harvester Heritage just as a written document, and it'll become, right? It can be, because it'll be tied to your name, which will link it to this interview, all that sort of stuff.
I had photographs on a thumb drive, and then I did the seminar just from notes.
Yeah. But even just those notes would be great, because you pull them all together and it will make sense. It'll still tell that story. So do you have any crazy stories from the dealership?
Well, I go back to the period in 1968. We actually dropped the ag dealership, or the ag part of the dealership.
In 68.
In 1968, Harvester was doing what the car companies are doing now. They said, we're going to get rid of all these little dealers, because every town had a little dealer. It was very personal. And I really thought that was the beginning of the downfall of International Harvester.
Very interesting.
We lost the personal contact.
That's,
And in fact, they came to my dad and said, well, we want you to go east. And that's where Suburbia was. He said, well, you go in here to east and build a big building and you'll be our local dealer. And my dad said, well, you're nuts. The suburbs of Chicago are going west.
Yeah.
And so we'll quit the ag business, the big tractors, and we'll just keep the Cub Cadets. So in 1968, we became just a Cub Cadet dealer, outdoor power dealer.
That was a pretty good business decision, I think.
Yep.
All considering.
Yes, it was. If we move up to 1980, I was at a dealer meeting in Hinsdale for all of us outdoor power dealers in northern Illinois and surrounding area. And a fella from Harvester by the name of Bob Lee stood up in front of us that fall. I believe that was in November of 1980. And he said to us, now, men, there's no truth to this that we're going to sell Cub Cadet. We're not going to sell Cub Cadet. It's making money for us, and that's an important part of our business. And
what was it, 2 years later?
No.
Less.
The next spring, in February, I had a call from the zone man. I think his name was Dan Leary, on a Sunday night, and he said, Mr. Houtz, Harvester has sold the Cub Cadet line. I'm no longer your rep. Have a good life.
Oh my goodness.
Goodbye.
Did you talk to him, or you left a message?
That's about what he said.
Wow.
And that was, so at that point, really, we had been a dealer for 47 years with International Harvester.
Yeah, that's a long time.
We've been, of course, a pure Cub Cadet dealer ever since that time.
Right.
And have only sold Cub Cadet. We only, and even to the day I closed, we only sold and we only worked on Cub Cadet tractors. I didn't work on anything else.
Right.
So there's another.
That makes you quite an expert.
Well, there's a lot of people come along and say, you know it all. No, I don't know it all. I know a lot, but I learn something new every day.
Well, I think that's important, that you keep learning. And I love the idea of a seminar on your expertise, and, people are going to be fixing up Cub Cadets forever. And like I said, I've never heard of an unsatisfied customer with that product.
Well, yeah. There's some out there.
Yeah. Well, there's some people who can't be pleased.